Okay, you have the floor. Just state your name and go ahead.
As to say, good evening, friends. Raymond Two Hawks Watson. And tonight I am here in my capacity in two regards. First, as Policy Director for the Center for Indigenous Peoples' Rights, and also as Chippanuk Sachem of the Meshipag Narragansett tribe, which are Narragansett people based here in the Providence, Cranston area. Just for a little bit of background, last May, I graduated from Roger Williams University School of Law with a Juris Doctorate, focusing in federal Indian law and indigenous law and policy in particular. And I just sat for the bar this past February, so I'm just waiting to hear what the results are this April. And I share that to say that there's been a lot of discussion tonight coming from people's feelings and beliefs and experiences. So I want to talk a little bit more about the law, if I could, because I think that's probably the most pertinent discussion to be able to have tonight. First and foremost, I want to say, and I imagine that all of us, especially our distinguished guest here today, understand the differences in sovereignty and jurisdictions between sovereigns. The federal government is a separate sovereign from the state of Rhode Island. Rhode Island is not necessarily obligated to do everything that the federal government thinks it should do. Rhode Island is its own sovereign. And that same concept applies to Rhode Island's relationship with its Indian tribes. Representative Vera Wilkinson said earlier, she reached out to the BIA and to the National Congress of State Legislatures, and they said it's up to the state what they want to do. So I'm really confused when I hear this conversation that any tribe needs to go to any other tribe, or that the state needs to go to a particular tribe to have a relationship with the other tribes. I don't understand the lawful basis for that. But beyond that, I went to the National Congress of State Legislatures website, and it says right on there, recognizing one tribe on a state level doesn't impact the federal recognition relationship. So once again, I don't understand this notion that the state of Rhode Island needs to go and check with one particular tribe before it establishes a relationship with any other tribes. There's no legal basis for that argument, and I would challenge anyone to please show me the legal basis for it if they think there is one. Beyond that, and we'll talk a little bit of history, I'm direct descendant of Chief Brister Michael, who was the last council chief of the Narragansett tribe of Indians, which is different from the Narragansett Indian tribe, to be forced to sign off in 1881 when we talk about the detribalization. And when times got rough down on the reservation after that, the whole family moved up here to Providence, the chief's lines. So we can look at that, and then we can look at it in the early 1920s. Narragansetts from down in South County came up to my uncle Chief Sunset here in Providence and asked for his blessings to reestablish the tribe down in South County. So from my own family bloodline and history, my mind boggles to think that my people and I would be expected to go to any other tribe to get their permission for the state to have a relationship with us. Now we can bring that to the bill today. Why should the Seekonk Wampanoag, who are Pokanoket, have to go to the Narragansett Indian tribe, who, might I add, if you look at the history as we've been discussing, have a lot of Niantic blood in them? The royal lines, the chief's lines, come from Ninigrit, who was the chief of the Nehantic. Why are Narragansetts and Pokanokets now expected to go down and ask permission from a tribe that's a lot of Niantic blood? None of this is making sense, and none of it should be considered when you good people make a decision on whether or not you're going to state recognize the Seekonk Wampanoag tribe. I personally am fully in support of the Seekonk Wampanoag tribe being state recognized, and that's without the Meshipag tribe having an official relationship with the state. Why? Because every tribe is its own political entity, and the state is required by law to deal with them as such. So whether or not Meshipag has a relationship with the state should have nothing to do with whether the state has a relationship with the Seekonks, but I would say this: the state should have a relationship with all of its Indian tribes. And that's the only question I would ask when it comes to the state recognition bill. Is that the particular process that the state wants to put in place? Because it's extremely cumbersome. It'll be ineffective. And I'll be quite honest, the federal process isn't a good one, in my opinion. And I don't think the state should replicate it, and the state doesn't have to. I'll close my remarks with saying this. People's feelings, people's beliefs, all of those things can and should be taken into account, especially when you're talking to indigenous populations here in the state of Rhode Island. Rhode Island goes back to the very beginning. It was one of the first colonies to deal with indigenous folks. It goes all the way back to the King Philip's War. But that being said, this notion somehow that because something happened on a federal level, it happened on a state level is absurd. Rhode Islanders know that. You all know that. Rhode Island does what Rhode Island thinks it should do. It does that in several different avenues. I don't know why all of a sudden when it comes to Indians, the state is folding and acting like it doesn't have any sovereignty. Personally, I would suggest rather than going through a cumbersome recognition process, the state look at reestablishing the Indian Commission, which was in place before. I did a really nice article on Go Local a few weeks ago that laid out a lot of these points. I'd be happy to share it. But my point is this. The state of Rhode Island can determine the path it wants to craft when dealing with its Indian tribes. It doesn't have to do what one particular tribe says. It doesn't have to listen to a particular tribe because it has a relationship with the federal government. And no one particular tribe has the right to determine what the state does with other tribes or how other tribes deal with the state. Every tribe is its own political entity. Every tribe should have a relationship with the state. And I'm fully in support of the Seekonk Wampanoag tribe being state recognized. Katapatush Wujia Chusuta. Thank you for listening to me and Winnie Nakan. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much for your testimony. There's a question for you if you wouldn't mind taking a question from Deputy Speaker Hall.
Ray, and thanks everyone who showed up here. It's an enlightening issue that's happening to all of us because I bet you nobody here in this room understands how many tribes are really involved here. Mm-hmm. I beg to say that they know, because I don't know. And I'm glad that you brought up a couple of issues that we need to know in order for us to decide what we're going to do on this bill, because it's going to affect a lot of people here, but we don't know.
Absolutely.
So I thank you. Would you send over that piece that you sent over for the committee?
Sure.
That's just the start.
Sure.
But we need to learn about all the Indian tribes here in Rhode Island because they are our history. And in order for us to understand where we need to go, the Indians need to go, we need to understand where you're at.
Very good.
Do that for me.
Absolutely, sir, and thank you for asking.
Thank you.